evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our panel at Two-Speed Cybersecurity in the Western Balkans. This panel has a regional approach to cybersecurity, regional comparison, and talking about regional cooperation and cybersecurity, and cybersecurity governance in the broadest sense. My name is Franziska Klopfer. I work for the Geneva Center for the Democratic Control of Armed Forces, DCAF, and my organization looks into security sector governance, security sector reform. We've been working on cybersecurity and cybersecurity governance for some years now. We've organized a number of activities here in the region, regional activities, capacity building, and also at the national level in Serbia, together with our partner organization, the Diplo Foundation, really looking into bringing together, building the capacity of different stakeholders who are involved in cybersecurity governance. Because what is interesting, of course, and challenging and nice and interesting about cybersecurity governance, unlike other security governance, you don't only have a limited number of actors involved, but you have many actors. So you don't only have the government or the executive who's involved in developing and implementing policies, but also the private sector, the technical community, the service providers of information services who contribute to developing governance models and who are obviously essential part in implementing it, just as the users are and civil society who represent the users and the users' rights. So it is an interesting and challenging topic, and it's also a fascinating policy area. We have worked recently on a project which was led by the Diplo Foundation, and research into what's happening in cybersecurity in the region, how cybersecurity governance is developing in the region in different countries, and also what's happening in terms of cooperation. And of course, cooperation, it's clear that this is one of the key aspects of cybersecurity governance because of the interconnectedness of the web. You cannot approach as a single country this issue separately. So there's many different levels of cooperation. We will discuss about them later. And this study that the Diplo Foundation did and that DCAF participated in looked into just those issues. And what was interesting in this study is that we saw that there's actually quite a difference in the ways cybersecurity policies develop and advance in the countries of the Western Balkan region. So this is something where we wanted to know more about. It's also, of course, very important to look at those differences because the differences in the development of policies of the countries will have an impact into how the countries can cooperate, because if there's too much difference, it might be more difficult for countries who don't have the same mechanisms in place, for countries which has a computer emergency response team that wants to cooperate with a CERT in another country, but the CERT is not set up yet. So who do they, work with? So these two questions are really linked for us about the cooperation in the region, how that can be enhanced, and how can we improve the development of cybersecurity policies in the different countries to make sure that countries are more on the same level. So for this panel, I have two aims really that I want to discuss and that I want to have as an outcome of our discussion, to really see which are the areas where more cooperation is needed and how can we achieve this improved cooperation, and what also on a national level are these areas where countries need to improve, and how can they learn from other countries in the regions, just key push and pull factors that help them to advance their cybersecurity framework. So I'm very happy to have with me 4 excellent experts in my panel. The way we organize the panels, we have an hour and a half. We'll start with a short introductory comments by my 4 distinguished panelists. Then I will ask a couple of follow-up questions, and then I will open the floor to questions from you, the audience. I will start with the man in the middle, Vladimir Radunovic, who is Director of e-Diplomacy in Cybersecurity at the Diplo Foundation, the organization I was mentioning earlier, organization that DCAF has worked with for a couple of years already. Vladimir has great experience on a number of fields. The Diplo Foundation, he works a lot in trainings of different stakeholders, but I think what is also very interesting is that Vladimir has been involved for many, many years on the national, international level, regional level, on internet governance discussions. For example, in the IGF, in the Internet Governance Forum, he's a member of the MAG. He's also very much a driver of the regional IGF, the SEE, DIG, the Southeast Europe Dialogue on Internet Governance. So Vladimir knows the technical details, he knows civil society, he knows government, and he knows what kind of discussions are happening on the regional and on the international level. So I'll start by asking Vladimir actually a very specific question, going back to the study that I mentioned. I already told the audience that in this study you found differences in development of different countries of the Western Balkan region. So Vladimir, I think it's quite interesting for the audience to find out what your findings were, and maybe you can share with us a little bit more what you found and what you in your analysis found, why there are differences or similarities, and what kind of lessons you and your research team drew from that.
Thank you, Franziska. You might have raised the expectations now from my side quite a bit. I would object me sitting in the middle. I would always rather prefer the ladies to sit in the middle. But in a nutshell, looking at the room actually here, and I'm again pleased, this is the 3rd or the 4th time that the cybersecurity session is taking place in the BSF. Looking at the room, I think this is actually an excellent example of the situation in the Balkans when it comes to cybersecurity. The room is packed, but it's too small. It's just no one understands how this topic is important. No one gives enough space to this topic, even though there is interest, even though there are competent people that can actually cope with that. The second thing is, if you look around the room again, there are just few ladies, and that's pity. And I suppose, knowing how the educational background in Balkans, and not just in Balkans, is that the guys are mostly the IT or the techies in the background, and the ladies might not be. So that also shows that, to the largest extent, the discussions roam around technical aspects rather than political, legal, or other. And there is a lack of this multidisciplinary approach when it comes to cybersecurity. I would challenge just to, if you want to show the hands, how many people are coming from the government sector? Well, it's quite good. I'm happy to see that. And the private sector? Okay. So this is actually a great example. I suppose the others might be from the civil society or academia. Academia. Okay. This is probably the example as it should be. What we managed to find out, firstly, we didn't find any kind of comprehensive research before this one about the cooperation in the region. And that's already a pity, because there are some research work done in the region, but there was no comprehensive coverage of what's happening in the region. So this one is kind of a pilot study. It's probably not perfect, but I invite you to look through it. And okay, this is just an illustrated executive summary where we try to make a funny way for a short reading. But in a nutshell, most of the countries in the region, we are talking about the Western Balkans, including Croatia, most of the countries have made some initial steps. When it comes to cybercrime, evidently all the countries have signed and ratified the Budapest Convention. Most of the countries do have at least the law or the strategy. Bosnia and Macedonia are lagging a little bit behind. Croatia is obviously the most advanced one since it is already a member of the EU. So in Croatia you have really the structures in place, even though there is no, so to speak, the evident mechanism of a multi-stakeholder and public-private partnership which is sustainable. Bosnia is still coping to start with either strategy or law, and anyhow the security sector in Bosnia is divided. Montenegro made quite a good progress in the last couple of years, starting with the law and then working on the strategy and even defining the critical information infrastructure, even though the critical infrastructure on the national level is not defined. So, in a way, the framework is getting there, more or less. What's lagging, what's missing is the implementation. So the form is there, and it's a common thing in Balkans, not related to cybersecurity, I'm sure. The form is there, mostly because the EU, NATO, and the other OSCE and the other fora kind of demand us to do that, to tick the box that we have it. But there is a lack of sustainable and comprehensive strategic approach, especially in terms of involving other partners. What the world generally knows, and what I'm happy that we have also this panel, the mix of stakeholders, is that you just can't defend yourself in cyberspace alone, whoever does it. Bear in mind that the policies are drafted and prepared and decisions are brought by the government. The corporate sector actually owns 80-90% of the infrastructure, the software, the hardware. The knowledge is in the technical and academic community. The connections and a kind of a balance when it comes to human rights and other aspects is in civil society. You can't do it alone. And that's what's probably my biggest remark when it comes to the regional models. And the one that I started with is the political awareness that the cyber component of security is immensely important. That's not something we saw the Ukrainian electrical grid, power grid that crashed, the part of Ukrainian power grid which crashed in December, leaving a part of Ukraine without electricity because of the cyber attack. These things can happen here. We are not far from that at all. Even the US analysis shows that the Ukrainian system was quite advanced. No one did the research of how prepared we are when it comes to critical infrastructure in this region. If we even think about this black scenario, if one part of the grid goes down, it will probably drag the entire region down because it's all connected when it comes to power plants. That's just one of the examples. So basically there is no political awareness how important this is. And I guess I'll stop on that one and we can get back to the regional level cooperation afterwards.
Yeah, I think I have really a couple of questions for you on that as well. But maybe just a quick follow-up question. You rightly said that there's no political awareness. Do you know, can you what's your own explanation why there's no political awareness?
I suppose there is.
Or do you think a catastrophe would have to happen?
That's one of the. But let's face it. Estonia realized it after a catastrophe in 2007. Netherlands survived the cyber attack. I mean, this is Georgia. This is happening, and unfortunately, it might happen that we have to survive something like that to get aware. When was it? September last year, when the telecom network in Croatia went down. It was not a cyber attack, but it was a clear showcase of what happens when you have a telecom network down for a day. That you can't get money out of the ATMs, that you can't pay anything, that you simply the whole financial flow is blocked. That's just one thing. So hopefully we're not going to have to wait for that. There are a couple of researchers, and I mentioned that a research of Estonian scenario if Serbian infrastructure would be attacked with a DDoS attack like Estonia was in 2007, the economic loss would be about 10 million euro per day. And it goes exponentially if we don't have a CERT which is operational and can stop the attack. And that's just a case for Serbia in 2013, it's probably even more now. The other reason is, it is to some extent because we are not forced by the EU. The Chapter 10 negotiations are very, very superficial on cybersecurity. They're not requiring too much. With the new NIST directive, we might expect that the expectations from the accession countries will be higher, and then maybe we'll be required to go further with the form. But then again, there is a risk that we stick to the form, and then we don't give enough resources, funding, and everything to the CERTs. We don't do the strategy in the comprehensive way. We don't involve the stakeholders, so it all goes as a tick the box. That's the reason.
Okay. But I'd like to move on to, on this note, to Dr. Oliveira Iñaz. Welcome, Dr. Iñaz. On this topic that Vlada has just opened for us. Dr. Iñaz is assistant professor at the University of Banja Gorica in Montenegro. She is an expert in global security and has also been working on cybersecurity in the past couple of years, especially on national security policy and strategy and how this is linked to cybersecurity risks. So, Dr. Iñaz, actually following on from Vlada gave us the more regional view, and we would like to hear from you about how in recent years cybersecurity policies have been developed in Montenegro. Again, the questions: what were the kind of push factors? What brought about the change? What were the important pieces of legislation or strategy that were adopted? And if you maybe also, if anything that Vlada said resonates with you in terms of political awareness and how this has changed. If you could tell us a little bit more about that, please.
Thank you, Francisca. It's my pleasure to be part of this panel. Even if you said there is not a lot of women in the field of security, I would agree with you. There is just a few of them that belong to that part of academia or civil society. It's a really good opportunity to discuss about that, and as a security studies professor, just give me a chance to tell a few words. I would say that generally the problem in Western Balkans is that we don't have awareness on the how challenging are security risks. I would say that we are everything what you mentioned. I couldn't agree more on the problems that exist here in most of the countries or in a regional level. But main problem is lack of awareness how fast is cybersecurity becoming, and you have every day new risks, and you don't have capacities and resources to solve the problems and to protect country, infrastructure, citizens, and everything. The situation is very interesting in Montenegro, and I would say the main question of the panel is here. I mean that most of the audience think how it became important and why it became important in Montenegro. I would say there were two leading powers in the process of building cybersecurity policy in the last 3 years, actually, when strategy was adopted in 2013. So in the last 3 years, actually, there are just a few steps that are important to mention. If you give me a chance, I would say a few that I mean important. What is actually two leading or riding powers? It was first of all integrations into NATO and EU. NATO integrations, because even in strategy and everywhere you will see how it's important, and it became cybersecurity became very important in NATO cyber security policies. So they are asking from the countries, the new one and existing one, to improve and raise awareness on cyber defense and also other things that relate to cybersecurity. So that is one leading power, and the other one is, I would say, awareness, because we had a lot of incidents in the last few years. And regarding that, we implemented or established national CERT and also like local CERT. So the problem is, I mean, in Montenegro in general, a lack of institutions and lack of experts in the field of security, cybersecurity. If you don't have people that can that can participate or can improve situation, you have actually nothing in cybersecurity. And I know that the needs of the countries are very similar, because critical infrastructure within the Western Balkans is really similar. In the field of energy, field of transportation, telecommunication, these are the most critical infrastructure fields in IT. But in general, there are still existing the problems. What was important to mention about something what you said? Who are the actors actually in our countries that can drive the process of improvement in the field of cybersecurity? In Montenegro, they try to improve situation in governmental level, but there is still a lack of knowledge in academia and civil society. If you don't have a public-private partnership in the field of cybersecurity, it's nothing. That's why I want to stress, as you see in national strategy of Montenegro, the main focus was to improve more and more actors in the field of cybersecurity, both protection and response. Because it's important who build the hardware and software and who belong to. There is also another important things from the field of cybersecurity. Internet became really present in Montenegro. I don't know. So far, it's 80% of users of the internet and telecommunications are in Montenegro. I don't know the situation in Bosnia and Herzegovina, for example, because they are not very low in the level of cybersecurity. But it's also very important. Flexible and dynamic cybersecurity organizations, do they exist in our countries? In Montenegro, we have national CERT and also in the local levels. So that's something what we actually need to improve in the future. And another thing is also how we have resilient cybersecurity policy and capacities. Because when I say resilience in cybersecurity, it's also important. If you have donations, that's what you raised, I would say, in your research. If you don't have resilient systems to protect country and national security within the countries, we will have probably more and more cybersecurity incidents in the future. I will stop now, because I didn't want to stress how we are leading in the region, because I'm sure Croatia is in the best stage when we are coming to cybersecurity. Montenegro did a lot in the last 3 years, but still there is a lot of lack between the capacities, between the strategy, capacities, and implementation. And these are three main steps that we have to work in the future. So I will stop now and waiting for your next question or discussion.
Thank you, Olivera. This is very interesting, and I think what I quickly wanted to follow up on is you underlined, and I think very clearly, that there is, of course, a driver integration EU and NATO. There's, therefore, some willingness to reform the system, and to, you had key documents like the cybersecurity strategy and legislation, but you said that the capacity is key and it's still lacking. And you mentioned in that context public-private partnerships. Do you maybe want to say something more about, so did you have in mind private-public partnerships where the private sector also helps to train people in government and to increase their expertise, or what did you talk about?
Actually, it's the main of great importance is collaboration between between private companies that have IT, hardware and software and everything. Sometimes collaboration is important between law enforcement, especially, and private companies. That's crucial for the cybersecurity, I would say, these days in the 21st century. Vlada mentioned 8% within the region, it belongs to private companies, cybersecurity infrastructure, and that's why I mentioned that. When it comes to collaboration between inside the governmental institution, it's also one of the questions probably that will be raised here. if you have ministries, agencies, and many different levels, sometimes problems in lack of coordination and cooperation in the field of cybersecurity is critical obstacle in improvement of policies in the field of cybersecurity. Thank you.
That brings me actually to my next panelist, Mr. Robert Kostler, who's joining us from Microsoft. He came from Munich, I think, via different countries in Southeast Europe that he visited recently, because Mr. Kostler is actually Microsoft's regional manager for Southeast Europe and in the field of public safety, national security and defense. And of course, that is perfect to now have somebody from the private sector there who can maybe talk a little bit about the interests and the needs of the private sector and how they see the activities of government and what they would like to see more. But actually, let me tell you a little bit more about Mr. Kostler, because that's not all I can say about him. What is very interesting to know about Mr. Kostler, that he has a interesting and long career behind him already, working first in Poland in the armed forces as a specialist on information security, and then working for the government of Poland as a representative in also again many international, especially NATO working groups discussing common approaches to information and cybersecurity. But also he has very practical hands-on experience when he was one of the leaders who set up the National Information Security Authority in Poland. So many different experiences, all of which I think we would be interested in hearing about. So let me start by asking you, Mr. Kostler, we've heard now what seems to be a problem in the region, what seems to be some of the opportunities in order to advance national cybersecurity policies. From your experience in Poland, but also the other countries that you work with in the region, what do you see as the main drivers for improving cybersecurity policies, and what kind of general lessons do you think other countries, especially the countries in Western Balkans, can learn from that?
Thank you. Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. And I would like to thank you, organizers, for having me here. That may be quite interesting. As you mentioned, I'm representing industry, so I try to use my double hat actually to help my colleagues across the region, because I'm responsible for 30 countries in the region, so starting from Cyprus, Malta, Balkans, former Warsaw Pact, Russia, up to Mongolia actually. So this experience for 20 years in the government service, I try to right now to combine two words. One word of the government, thinking about regulations, thinking about the laws, and thinking about organizations, with the word that comes actually from industry, so the word of technology. By the way, Microsoft is not only technology focused, has not only technology focus. As you know, we introduced, for many years, we run Trustworthy Computing Initiative, announced in 2002. But we also support governments, a lot of governments in developing and drafting the national cybersecurity strategy. There is a dedicated team in Redmond led by Paul Nicholas, the former cyber executive from White House. This team is working with governments across the region to draft cybersecurity strategies. The team, by the way, is called Global Security and Strategy and Diplomacy, actually. So you see that it's not a product focus, it's not services focus, but it's focused on impact. And actually, this team is working with industry, with governments in support of building the capabilities that Oliviera mentioned that are so necessary actually for each and every government. That's why I'm looking, when I'm discussing with governments how industry can collaborate, I usually focus on three areas. So the legal, organizational, and technology. Again, this is I think quite important to mention, because if you miss one of those three areas, you will not be able to build your cyber defense capabilities or cyber security resiliency, as Oliviera mentioned. I fully agree about resiliency. This is one of the key topics that we need to discuss. Resiliency that comes from technology. resiliency that needs to utilize new solutions. And that's why I think one of the examples, if you ask me about examples from the region, you mentioned about Estonia, about the impact, negative impact and also positive impact from the attack that happened in 2007. By the way, the attack happened during one of the meetings of NATO cyber defense workshop that was hosted in US at that time, and we discussed actually how to collaborate between the nations. And then the message from Estonia came, we are under attack. So there was the first attempt how to collaborate, how to exchange information, how to support Estonia in countering this, in mitigating the impact of this attack. So talking about Estonia, I think, and talking about resiliency, Estonia understands the geopolitical situation around Estonia. So they clearly understand that they are fully rely on availability of their government services. You know about e-citizen, Estonian way how to address businesses and how to help people to utilize fully electronic communication, digitalization actually. So if we talk about digital transformation, Estonia is one of the leading countries across the region. So that's why they understood actually how they can be attacked, how they be negatively impacted by successful targeted cyber attack. So that's why they decided to run the project that was implemented last year, interesting pilot project that was called Virtual Data Embassy. So when Estonia decided actually to host some government data outside of the borders, of physical borders of the country. Of course, we have a lot of discussions across the region with the governments about adoption of cloud computing technology, when many governments say to us, no, we need to have our data within our borders. Even if there was discussion by European Commission and also the representative of data protection offices from 28 member states. So it was called the decision of Article 29 working group. Took a decision 2 years ago that cloud technology can be used for processing EU data as long as data stays within the borders of the European Union, of course. So in this case, actually, talking about virtual data embassy, the best example how cloud technology was used to host presidential and the president of Estonia data and services, and also one of the most important services that is about the laws. So the repository of all legislation in Estonia. So talking about some specific examples, referring to legal initiatives. Of course, we see, and your very good summary from the region around how national cybersecurity strategies are developed. But this is the first step, of course, need to be followed by the laws, first of all, also laws that will map the existing organizations. And what I see, and the major problem in the countries is who will be the most important in cybersecurity. I think it's not a question. There are many stakeholders that need to work together, need to collaborate. And what is quite interesting, you're asking about trends. The trend is that both organizations are more open to work with outsiders than internally within the country. So that's a problem. The trust is not about to build the trust between the government and industry, but also to build the trust between different government stakeholders. That's why it's so important, as what Olivera mentioned about something like the sponsorship from the executive level. That's why we need this type of awareness from the government bodies, the government executives, from the prime minister level, from the president level, because Estonian activities being directly and personally supported by President Ilves. And I don't know, and this is one of the best examples how president actually pushed the government to invest a lot of efforts into cybersecurity. But we have also countries where the prime minister is leading actually and pushing the government, first of all, to nominate the body that will coordinate. So it's not the body that is the most important, but the body that will collect information as a national cybersecurity center. Collect information not only from the government bodies, from the CERT teams, but also the main CERT teams like telcos CERT teams, like financial services, where actually to increase situation awareness, because when we cover the legal part, we need to cover organizational part. So having different CERT teams, it doesn't mean that we have situation awareness what's going on in our networks. That's when we refer to resiliency. To build resiliency, we need to know what's going on actually in our infrastructure. What's more, as it was One of them, the example was the audit that was made by the new Ministry of Digitalization in Poland when the government changed. One of the quite interesting conclusions was that we are missing the awareness how many data centers have been built and where are they? What kind of services they can provide. So building resiliency, you need to know your resources. You need to actually run with consolidation of existing resources, focus on the security monitoring, analyze what's going on in those networks, and apply technologies that can increase resiliency like cloud computing. But I don't want to go beyond the 5 minutes, so that's why some few points that I dropped, actually, I think I addressed your question and I'm ready to continue this interesting discussion.
You did very well in a very structured way, and I think I've noted it down. I think we have a little recipe there already of how to put together a successful approach. I mean, it's really important to hear as well, again from you, this insistence on resilience and how you explain that this is, this needs to have you need to have the geopolitical awareness of your situation, of the threats, and then the awareness of what's happening in your country, the situational awareness about who's doing what and who needs which capacity in order to be active. And I think what also resonated with me is the fact that you said, first of all, as Olivera already mentioned, this needs to collaborate better between different government bodies, but also that there needs to be a lead from the high executive, and Vlada and I worked a lot also with experts from Finland, and they were saying the same, that the change in their country came with the Prime Minister decided, so this is what we're going to do, and then they systematically approach the strategy and try to cover all these areas that you just mentioned. I will have some follow-up questions for you later. I'll leave you in peace for the time being. And move to my final panelist, Mr. Nebojša Jokic. I'm also very happy that he could join us, because again, he has a very important and special expertise. Mr. Jokic is the head of the third team of the Computer Emergency Response Team in the Ministry of Internal Affairs here in Serbia. And Mr. Jokic also has a background, a technical background, and he's worked in the ministry for a number of years already and has followed developments there. And we were talking a lot about developments in ministries, between ministries. Maybe if you just tell us a little bit about what's happened in Serbia in recent years and what lessons you have drawn from the developments in Serbia.
Thank you. Good evening. Just a few words about the situation in Serbia. Compared to other countries in Europe, I think we are slightly behind the rest in the field, but situation in Serbia is better now than it was just a year ago. Meanwhile, we adopted law on information security, and that's the first and crucial step for further development of our regulation framework. Without that step, we cannot be in a situation to go further. Key elements of that law, from my opinion, are national competent authority, forming of national competent authority for information security, definition of place and the role of the national CERT, establishment of the body for coordination of information security, and definition of framework for identification and protection of ICT systems of special importance. In terminology of law on information security, this is synonym for critical information infrastructure. After the adoption of the law on information security, we continue to work on bylaws, and this process is in some ways slowed down due to parliamentary elections in Serbia in April this year, but we expect that this process will be completed soon and that by law will be adopted no later than by the end of this year. Another important task for us is development of national cybersecurity strategy. Working group is formed, and that working group is working on draft version of strategy, and I also expect that we have this part of regulation very soon. As Robert said, framework regulation is not all. Institutional regulation is also very important, and we start to establish bodies which establishment is mandatory by the law on information security, such as body for coordination of information security, and also the Ministry of Interior already formed our CERT. I must say that responsibility of our CERT is limited to the ICT system of the Ministry of Interior, but we are facing many problems in absence of national CERT. Other CERTs from various countries all around the world addressing to us with application to help them to solve the problems which source was in Serbia. So we act in a way that we contact relevant providers and try to solve the problems in cooperation with them. And when we are facing with criminal activities, we cooperate with Department for Fighting Against Cybercrime in my ministry. Also, we have another great task. That's a question of critical infrastructure and then especially critical information infrastructure. We expect that group with that task will be formed soon, and that group needs to have critical protection of critical information infrastructure in framework. And I agree also with Oliveira that we need new actors in this process. We need to incorporate representatives from industry, from large economic systems, from academia, various experts in this process, and I think that's a crucial form, and that's the way we can finish our regulation. And another aspect of institutional help can be help from developed countries and international organizations which can assist us in through expert or other help, other assistance for raising capabilities, because I think that's also crucial for our development.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jokic. I think it's you basically what Mr. Kosla and the other previous speakers have raised in more general terms, all the different areas that need to be developed, capacities, and certain key legislation and other documents like the cybersecurity strategy. But I think it seems like in Serbia, you just gave an example how all of these things are starting to be developed. So there's this awareness that these are, key steps to be taken. But I wanted to quickly ask you about, you already mentioned that you are approached by CERTs from other countries for collaboration. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? You said that it's a bit problematic because you actually would be the national CERT who would be the one they should approach, or can you tell us a bit more about the cooperation you've had so far?
Yes, but cooperation with other CERTs must be better. I can tell you I can speak about some example about police cooperation in this area. That's a new approach. Police forces of the Southeast European countries cooperate through Convention of Police Cooperation of Southeast European countries, of course. And there are several working groups that are formed in framework of this convention. And most of these working groups work on aspects that is primarily concerning police, like combating crime and things like that. But there is one working group, that's a thematic working group for telecommunications. Task of that working group is cross-border communications, so how to enhance cross-border communication and how to improve police communication in general. And we had meeting of that working group in June this year in Ljubljana, in Slovenia. So we decided to implement cybersecurity into the scope of this working group. And next week in Belgrade will be held first workshop for cybersecurity and protection of critical information infrastructure for IT security staff of police forces of the Southeast European countries, and that's a real example of the regional cooperation on that level in the field of cybersecurity.
Thank you. Yeah, the Police Cooperation Convention in Southeast Europe that you mentioned, I know quite well because my colleagues from DCAF are the secretariat to that convention. And I think that's an interesting and good concrete example of cooperation. Like you said, it's law enforcement dealing with cybercrime. I want to open this question going more concretely into regional cooperation now to the rest of the panel also. Cooperation, of course, in cybersecurity can mean all kinds of things. It can mean cooperation between private sector from different countries, governments from different countries. It can be on the level of developing common standards or information exchanges. Mr. Jokic just told us about, especially information exchange and cooperation between CERTs. It can also mean, working together on what we mentioned a couple of times already, protecting together these critical infrastructure or critical information infrastructure. For you, the panelists, where are key areas where cooperation really needs to happen? Between whom? Have you already heard of initiatives that have taken place so far that you can tell us about, or what do you think needs to be done most urgently now? Vladimir, we haven't heard from you for a while. Do you want to start?
Thanks. Well, I think you outlined a couple of important pillars of cooperation. I'll try to I just put some on paper. So one is combating crime, and Nebojša already mentioned that this works more or less. We have more or less all the framework in, and cooperation is there. It's probably not perfect, but it exists to some extent. Cooperation when it comes to resilience and network security, that should be probably on the more technical level. I haven't figured out any kind of a more concrete cooperation on that level. Cooperation when it comes to reacting to incidents, so that means the cooperation of the CERTs. There are a number of possible frameworks for cooperation of the CERTs, not necessarily in the region. There are international, first DF CERT and other kind of communities of CERTs which actually help all the CERTs around. It's easy to be there, we simply have to have operational CERTs. And those CERTs in the countries need to have enough resources to be able to travel, to be able to learn more, to be able to get new software, to this kind of things, which is usually an issue, because if it's set up as a bureaucratic institution, as most of the institutions in this region are set up, then it can't work. It simply has to be free to advance. Then it can be a cooperation when it comes to conflicts. There is an umbrella Okay, the UN has some negotiations when it comes to the cyber norms, but it's still the early stage. But the OSCE has a number of confidence building measures. Most of the countries have been, of the region have been kind of following on that, they know about them, but in practice, especially when it comes to capacity building and cooperation about critical infrastructure in practice, again, it doesn't work. Combating terrorism, I haven't heard of any kind of a, meaning the cyber component of it, of any kind of cooperation in the region. Cooperation when it comes to protection of the critical infrastructure, most of the countries in the region actually do not know what critical infrastructure, especially critical information infrastructure, is in their countries. So that's also missing. Cooperation when it comes to capacity building and education. We have seen some basic attempts in existing few regional bodies like RAKRIAK and RESPA, but they're really early signals that there might be something. And actually we do have institutions like those that could enforce more of a cooperation on cyber, but it's not happening. So in a nutshell, there is very few cooperation in the region. That's kind of what we try to show with this first illustration in the book. You have, it has to be one big building that covers the region. It can't be many small buildings because it's a cyberspace which is global in a way. And you have initiatives to build a couple of doors next to each other, but that's not the point. And put a window where there is no you know, any kind of a structure. So there are efforts, but they're absolutely not coordinated, and that's the main problem. And there are existing institutions. We mentioned the RAKRIAK, RCC. There are a number of other, like the Southeastern European NSA coordination and so on. But they are mostly built on enthusiasm of certain people. I'm not going to look at them, but some of them are here. And that's the problem. There is no system. There is no strategic approach to that. And even on a political level, it seems like the governments do not recognize that they have qualified people in their bodies, in their structures. They should bring in. It's kind of a matter of negative selection of the people. So that should also be enhanced.
Can I maybe quickly look at Mr. Kosla then, because I think what's interesting now is to hear a bit the EU perspective, because of course the EU sees the cooperation in cybersecurity as really an important, very important area, and the recent Network Information Security Directive says that very clearly, that member states have to develop their national capacities. They have to set in place contact people who cooperate with contact people from other countries. And they also put in place instructions about how the CERTs should cooperate between member states. So do you think there's good lessons to be learned there, and how can that be copied into for non-EU member states, countries in Europe which are not in the EU?
Good question, actually, and I think that the best practice is from EU. It's about R&D. R&D that is the focus of European Network and Information Security Agency. And the major problem for the European Union is that there is no operational body responsible for helping and working with national CERT teams. So ENISA is R&D body, but it's not operational body. That what is missing in the European Union picture. So as I see it from the national perspective, that was a good step because of European cybersecurity strategy. The second step was European Directive on Network and Information Security, but that should be a next step to identify or nominate a body, central body that will coordinate actually operational cyber defense, cybersecurity activities across the European Union. So as we see this type of initiative regarding the external borders, like Frontex to become operational agency, why not to discuss this topic from the ENISA perspective, to invest more in this agency, extend the role of this agency, and really become the coordination body. Talking about best practices about cooperation and collaboration program, I think that NATO strategic concept, actually, by introduction of NATO strategic concept, there have been three major areas defined. One was actually collaborative security, the second was collective defense, and the third one was crisis management capability. So if you map them directly into cybersecurity space, not talking just only about kinetic defense, you see exactly which areas should be developed. And 2 years ago, during NATO Information Assurance Symposium in Mons, NATO announced an NCA agency that is responsible for, and they keep dedicated cybersecurity service lines. The NCA agency announced the creation of NATO Industry Cybersecurity Partnership. So this is the public-private partnership body that includes representative of industry and NATO bodies and commands to build NATO capabilities. What's more, looking at NATO activities as well, there was first internal program announced. It was called Malware Information Sharing Program, to share information about malicious software between nations to increase their capabilities. So this is the area where actually the development of cooperation will be continued. And as NATO has operational capability embedded into NCIA, into NATO Computer Incident Response Capability Technical Center, but actually it's I may say NATO CERT. This type of body, of course, established direct bilateral cooperation with NATO members. And other initiatives, of course, can be and should be run regarding exercises. So we have good examples, good practices from NATO on cyber coalition exercises arranged every year. What's more, also, it goes beyond NATO countries, and the good practice actually with Locked Shield, with the exercises that are run by a Cooperative Cyber Defense Center of Excellence located in Estonia, but actually non-NATO countries are invited to this. And talking about EU and NATO, what we see finally, and it was discussed, it was announced also during NATO summit in Warsaw in July this year, there was a formal cooperation on cyber defense between EU and NATO that was missing before. So we see good practices and what industry can do for this collaboration, how we can help governments actually. So this is I may mention the program, very unique program that is run by Microsoft since 2002. That's Government Security Program. This is the program that initially was focused on sharing, on providing the access to the source code. But 2 years ago it was extended also to provide information regarding cyber threat intelligence. So we have running the global network, we actually collect a lot of information. We observe what are the trends, what are the methods, what are the sources of attacks. What is the modus operandi for cyber criminals as well. So we don't want to keep this information like a hot potato. So we utilizing the formal framework of the government security program that is free of charge for government, so it's not commercial agreement. We provide this information to respective CERT teams and law enforcement. So for law enforcement, when we need to fight against global botnets, there have been 14 counter and botnets operations performed since February 2010. First operations being done together with FBI, then we went to cooperate with European bodies, like you mentioned about police cooperation. So it's a European Cybercrime Center located within Europol structure was joining this community to fight botnets, and recently also Interpol. So the most recent operation in December last year was I may say global botnet operation. So this is through GSP, we work with governments. We provide support to develop national cybersecurity strategies. We provide information to CERT teams about technology, about countering attacks. We provide information about technologies that increase resiliency. And finally, we provide cyber threat intelligence. We provide trainings for forensics officers from police. So this is something that's a win-win actually. From industry side, we want to increase the investment of the criminals to be successful in cyberspace, and we want to increase the resiliency of the governments against the attacks, because naturally, as a service provider, we are interested to be able to provide continuous services to our customers.
I'd like to comment something to give my opinion on the collaboration in Western Balkans. First of all, regardless something what my colleagues mentioned, Vladimir and Robert, there is very important to stress that even the big countries like USA collaborate with security agencies, collaborate with private companies. For example, FBI cooperates in the field of cybercrime with a lot of forensics and forensic companies and other private companies from the field of cybersecurity, and NSA and other security agencies. So it's important to know that I would say in the era of digitalization, it's really difficult to expect that small countries or regions can improve cybersecurity resilience and policies without collaboration with and public-private partnership. Another thing, Vladimir mentioned, I didn't want to go in deep regarding global security, but for example, you mentioned cyber security and relation between cyber security and terrorism. That's really became problem within Western Balkans and everywhere in the world. If you know the example that I don't know how many millions of Twitter users are actually people who belong to terrorist organization all over the world. That's something what I did in the previous year, the research in that field. Actually, that will become the problem in the future, or actually now exists in Western Balkans and everywhere in the world, as everywhere in the world. So there is a lot of I could call it waves in the field of cybersecurity, and that's why I mentioned we don't have awareness on that in Western Balkans. So it is also one important aspect. There are three, regarding your question about Western Balkans collaboration, I would say there are three key factors to identify. I would say that we have general approach here. If you read most of the strategic documents, you could see there is general approach in lack of understanding differences between cybersecurity, cybercrime, or cyber, other things and other fields. So general approach everywhere, I would say in every country. And another thing is in which stage of development do we have in some Western Balkan countries in the field of digitalization? It's important to know how to identify where is the critical infrastructure. If you have countries that became more digitalized as Montenegro and Croatia and Slovenia, or wider region in Eastern Europe, and other countries that don't have a lot of internet users and other things in the field of IT. And the third thing is harmonization in the field of the policies, cybersecurity policies in Western Balkans. For example, all the countries went through the process of European integrations and reforms, building a legal framework and things like that, institutions, different things, and some of them came through the process of NATO integrations. There is also the issue how to harmonize the level of our development where we come here, and maybe to push some of the countries, like it's Macedonia and Bosnia and Herzegovina, to push them going up. You know, if you want to have cooperation, then you have to harmonize what you already have, that you can continue to cooperate. So there is a lot of open issues, I would say. It's good that you raise and that you organize this panel, and probably to do that you will continue to improve policies in this field, your institution and some others. But there is plenty of the open issues, I would say, in Western Balkans. Even if you mentioned, I agree with you, so you mentioned Soviet Center and some, you mentioned DCAF, it exists, but do they cooperate even in the field of organized crime? And are we satisfied with their cooperation? Is it enough? Is it relevant? Is it satisfied? Are we satisfied with it? Are they succeeded in their work? So there is, I would say, a lot of turbulences and not a lot of flexible approaches within the Western Balkan countries regarding cybersecurity. So there are the obstacles for the future cooperation, I would say, if I may, or if I see that in an analytical way. Yeah, these are my comments.
I would like to refer to the initiatives regarding fighting the countering terrorism, because we see some signs actually where the police forces see the need to cooperate, and the first example, good example, was the Cyprus conference this year. So where the chief police commissioner from Cyprus hosted representative of I think all European countries plus Australia plus US, where for the first time we've discussed actually how to use new technologies to counter terrorism, to detect the way how terrorist activities are financed by the cyber criminals. Of course, ransomware, it's perfect modus operandi to collect the money, to raise the funds for the kinetic terrorism activities. So that's why, from industry perspective, we discuss actually how to leverage from social media. First of all, because everybody knows that in opposition to Al-Qaeda, ISIS was very active in the internet for recruitment, especially for recruitment. Then using internet for propaganda. So that's why, and Microsoft also was engaged in this initiative to stop this type of usage of technology. That's why in May this year, first of all, in April this year, we supported the initiative of the United Nations Counterterrorism Committee Executive Directorate initiative, together with industry, academia, and governments, to limit the abuse of internet by terrorists. So that's why, following this establishment of this dedicated body based on public-private partnership, we supported also this actively. So, like we fight with botnets. In the same moment, we started to fight against terrorist content or terrorist-sponsored content to be shared across our services, online services. So we start to eliminate and to remove terrorist-sponsored or terrorist-sourced content from our online services, and we started this in May. We would like to cooperate with governments, so we are open to any government's information about where we can find, or if government will detect some terrorist-related content. We will be very open to work with governments on that. We are open also for the reports from regular citizens, that reports the content that comes from terrorists. Of course, there may be a discussion, what do you mean by terrorist content? And in this case, we need to rely on the definition of terrorism by United Nations, and we need to rely on the list of terrorism organizations that is maintained by United Nations. That's as a reference source for us. But this is one of the examples of activities actually countering terrorism in cyberspace.
Now, thanks to all of you. It seems like there's the great need in all kinds of areas for cooperation. There also seems to be a lot of good examples that different countries can learn from. So far, the feedback from what I've heard from you is that in terms of actually the willingness or the coordination of the countries, of the governments to really get involved in that is not so high yet. You're still a bit cautious about it. I'd like to use this opportunity to actually involve our audience as well, to tell us maybe their views on development of cybersecurity in the region, and especially concentrating on the issue of cooperation, or comments or questions that you have. I think we have a microphone probably somewhere, yes, over there. So if you just raise your hand, I will take a couple of questions. Can you please say your name, your affiliation if you want to, your question and then, or comment, and then say who the question is for, if you have it for somebody specific in the panel. Okay. You already look very
I'm very eager.
So yeah, I'll let you go first.
I speak very loudly, so
Okay, good.
the microphone.
Yeah.
Well, good evening, everybody. My name is Katarina Jonov, Master in International Law and PhD candidate at Faculty of Security. First of all, I would like to thank all the panelists for a wonderful introduction of cybersecurity issues. And, well, first of all, I would like to ask one question, and I will not, whoever wants to answer, please just give me the answer. Don't you think it's a bit unrealistic to talk about regional cooperation, since most of the countries in the region don't even have proper strategies when it comes to cybersecurity, and not even a basic knowledge? By the way, I come from academia and I'm very into cybersecurity, so I believe that the answer to your question, Professor, would be between 20 and 30,000 people were recruited by ECs on Twitter. And for Mr. Robert, I think you made a bit of a mistake. Cyberterrorism is not defined. There are no acts that define cyberterrorism.
I was talking about terrorism definition.
Oh, well, I
not
was talking
cyberterrorism.
generally about cyberterrorism because we are talking about cybersecurity. And my comment to you would be, don't you think that you probably approved the censorship by canceling the post from the terrorists? Because if I recall correctly, only Twitter actually admitted that they are making the censorship on the propaganda, cyber-terrorist propaganda. And I have one more question. I would like to hear Mr. Nebusha. How to make in Serbia, how to make it more visible, this cybersecurity issue? How to make politicians actually to become aware that this is an important security question? Or if you don't want to answer to me, I think Vladimir would like to. Thank you.
In the back.
Thank you. My name is Filip Svikovsky. I come from Analytica think tank in Skopje. One of my focuses when I was doing a master's was cybersecurity, and I've always been following it. I think it's an interesting topic and something that's going to be really relevant in the future. So my question will be, I assume maybe Vladimir Radunovic could answer it. When it comes to the region, what do you think about the working kind of safe practices of the employees in the civil sector, let's say in the big companies? Because we know that even if we have, like, say, the best system infrastructure in place, if the civil servants or the employees in the big companies are not following safety protocols and procedures, it's not going to help you not being attacked. And from what I have seen within the public administration, a lot of these people are, let's say, cyber illiterate. So how do we address this question? What's the best way to go with it, especially knowing how robust administrations in the region tend to be? It's kind of difficult to train, let's say, 180,000 public servants. So how do we work on this question? Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for the nice topic. My name is Angela Zvetkovic. I'm from Faculty of Political Science. So I would rise about the region just for short, because 2 weeks ago we had a case that Germany said it will sue WhatsApp in order to protect data from their citizens and from Hamburg Protection Data Officer. So if we're talking about the cooperation between business and civil society and the public sector, I was thinking if the main priority for the business is to monetize the data they can collect, and they are collecting it since they have a bigger infrastructure than the civil society and the public sector, how is it possible that they are willing to lower their incomes in order just to have a more cybersecurity? Can you comment on that, please? Is that whomever I will just read my questions.
I think
Okay. So there's not anything at the moment. Let me start by summarizing it. And I think the first question was about whether it isn't unrealistic to talk about cooperation if most or some countries in the region don't have cybersecurity strategy yet. So in your opinion, is that key in order to have cooperation? And I think I'd like to expand that question to, we talked already about what are the key elements that have to be in place in cybersecurity policy for a country, but also for a country then to cooperate. And is it even possible to cooperate if there's such a vast difference in the development there? So, any takers for that already?
Actually, I mentioned that I'm happy that I find someone who thinks the same as I do. I mentioned, oh yeah, and you're dealing, as I could see, your PhD in security, and I wish you luck, because it's not easy. Actually, my older professor who is here, he said, "Are we in gender security panel?" I said, "No, I'm in cyber security panel, not in common." But actually, I mentioned that. I mean with harmonization, lack of harmonization within Western Balkans, I mean about that. Serbia doesn't have strategy, even if you hear really good potentials in the field of cybersecurity. I read the really good studies on cybersecurity in the last 4 years, prepared by the people from the Ministry of Defense and the Military Academy, and some research, and someone doesn't have strategy, there are laws, there are no institutions, there is search, there is no search, there is a mess, believe me. So that's a really good question. That's why I said it's important to push things up, I mentioned at the beginning, that NATO actually pushed, NATO integration of Montenegro pushed policy in the field of cybersecurity, and I stand with it. I'm sure I can prove it in many elements, so we have stuck with integrations. I heard a lot of panels these days, and as you can see, there is the message of this conference, what's going on with the EU integrations in Western Balkans. And if you have that situation, you have problems with, or stuck in integration and fatigue in integrations in Western Balkans, both in EU and NATO. And if you have lack of harmonization in these fields, how you will improve? I could see you had a really interesting, your study, a really interesting recommendation. I underline in Cybersecurity Center of Excellence. Yes, it exists. NATO Cybersecurity Center of Excellence in Estonia, but we are not in a stage like Estonia and some other countries here. So, good recommendations, but there is, I would say, a lot of steps prior to that. So, that's my comment and answer. Thank you.
So I will follow up on what Olivera mentioned. It's actually CCDCOE is open for other countries. It's not only NATO. So this is funded by Estonia and by partnering countries.
That's supporting.
And what's more, is regional cooperation possible? I believe so. That's the definition of cooperation, but you need at least two sides to be interested in something, yes? In common, there must be a common interest. So there is no strategy needed by criminals to cooperate with each other to commit the crime, to perform the crime. There is also, the common interest needs to be between nations. If two nations are targeted and they see the infrastructure located in the third country, they will cooperate with the third country to eliminate this infrastructure. So even without the strategies, they will use existing channels like collaboration, police to police, prosecutor office to prosecutor's office. We didn't touch on the prosecutor's capabilities, because even if you invest a lot of money in trainings of policemen, if you will miss the prosecutors to be ready actually to go with investigations in cyberspace, there may be a problem. I think one of the best examples right now was introduced by the General Prosecutor Office in Poland to train and create the regional cyber and prosecutor offices in all the regions. And the same follow-up with the training, common training together with policemen. So this is also the area where we should talk about it. So cooperation is possible. So even if, of course, it cannot be declared that from tomorrow we will collaborate and cooperate with all topics. But we should start step by step, starting to cooperate locally, then cooperate in common operations, then cooperate under umbrella of common exercises. That's why some exercises, and I may tell you again, referring to some countries, you can believe or not, but the first really nationwide exercises in Poland were not arranged by government. They've been arranged by NGO, by one of the Secure Cyberspace Foundation. By the way, the same organization initiated 2 years later the first cyber exercises in Georgia. So we actually include the stakeholders from industry and from government to exchange information, to develop procedures to exchange information, and then to be ready for an unexpected situation. So this is something that, of course, there's always the question of trust. Trust built locally, trust built bilaterally between the nations. Answering your question about the terrorism, I didn't use maybe I was not clear, but I talk about terrorist content. The content that is mentioned by United Nations, and you have a terrorist organization sanctions list. So I'm talking about this one, and we are referring only to this list. That's, as you mentioned clearly, and as I said, we don't have any other definitions that we can rely on. So that's why we use United Nations terrorists. Talking about censorship, actually we don't censor, we don't eliminate information just out of the box. We align with local laws. So if the local government says that the server located there includes terrorist content and inform about this Microsoft, we will eliminate the links from our browser, from our search Bing, to this specific content. So we don't remove the content physically that's located there, so it's not a real censorship. What's more, our activity is focused on just eliminate the hate language and violence promotion. So it's always in this way. So we are very transparent. You can find clear definition. You can always get the full explanation why we do it. And it's not only Twitter is censoring actually the Facebook as well. They eliminate the websites that are related to the hate speech and also promotion of violence. So Facebook is doing the same.
I believe also in collaboration, and we collaborate with many stakeholders, and I think that trust is keyword. You need time for trust, but when it happens, collaboration is good. Our Department for Fight Against Crime collaborates with many similar police units all around the world, and they perform some joint operations. For example, in the last operation was included, I think, 19 countries. A large operation against pedophilia. So we have examples on that field. And about your question about how to wake up politicians, I think it's hard but not impossible. I think policy of small steps are best policy for that. It takes time also, but it's only successful policy. Maybe Vlad, something to add.
I will divert the response. No, quickly on cooperation, I don't think first cooperation exists. It exists mainly on the NGO level. We have good examples, and it's not just what Diplo did and DCAF in the region, but this is a good example. We actually managed in a couple of 2 or 3 years past, we managed to bring stakeholders, including the governments and private sector, and all of them together from the region. A couple of instances. That means even the NGOs can do that. So there is some kind of cooperation, but it's mostly the cooperation on dialogue. There is no political cooperation. That's what's missing on a political level. And we keep talking about crime and even the terrorism, but sometimes we miss the possibility of conflicts. And that's the big deal now. Because the governments are starting using or misusing the cyberspace. And I mean, Balkans is the barrel of gunpowder anyhow. So the cyber can be another component of conflict which can simply blow up. And this level of political and diplomatic awareness is also one of the missing components, which is increasingly important. So it's about how do we engage political level. There are some of recommendations on the cooperation here. The Center of Excellence is just one idea. What might be missing in the region, apart from, of course, the NATO one, but that's kind of a regional effort. But how do we wake the politicians? I guess the Nobel Prize is for that. I'm just not sure. Apart from waiting for a possible incident. Well, but I agree with Nebusha. Small steps, even the steps like bringing them all together. Currently in Serbia, I think we have the group which was built through this process of discussion among the stakeholders, a group of 30, 40 different institutions, most of whom are actually in the room as well. And there is a kind of a continuous move on that. Now it's about making the government to recognize that there is a community of people from their structures and others they can use already. How do we do that? I guess it's time. I guess it's just time.
Thank you. No, thanks to all of you. I think that these are all really good concluding comments that you made. I'd actually like to close the panel now.
So there was
And there's one more.
one question, I think, about ROI. Yes? ROI. We missed the investment, how to... The last
Okay,
one.
you want
Yes,
to
just
respond to
quickly.
that? Yeah.
That's a very good question, actually. You know, to build the network that is that can be used for the botnet attacks, you need to invest the money right now. You need to buy it or you need to build it yourself. So if we are able, together with law enforcement in the countries where the components of command control centers of command and control components are located, we are able to take them down, to switch off this network, then the criminals are losing money. So of course they need to invest more and more, and that's why we can raise the threshold from where you need to have really high capabilities to perform successful attack. Of course, it's not valid for ransomware attacks that are quite easy to perform, and actually you can send somebody the malicious software that will infect your machine and encrypt the content, and then you ask for ransom to be paid. But at least for botnets, we've been able actually to work with law enforcement and successfully limit the number of really powerful global botnets.
And Lara, you also still wanted to comment on the question regarding capacities in the civil service. I think this relates again to all this, what we mentioned before, this lack of capacity at government level. And I think what would be interesting to know, so what do you think is the level of capacity that's needed for a country to even engage? Again, when can they even start to engage in cooperation? What kind of level of capacity, even at the lower level of, you know, simple employee in a civil service position needs to have?
Yeah, thanks. I think it's really a relevant question, the level of awareness of the end users, because 90% of incidents actually start from end users, whether in the administration or the users in companies or whatever, is a big deal. There are a couple of papers, even suggestions that I can suggest. We did a little bit of research on these kind of things, cooperation, and it's public-private partnership again. Within the OSCE and the DCAF research in Serbia, Diplo had a similar research on competence building or the trends in the OECD countries on competence building. And two of those trends are interesting. One is how do you build the competences of the public sector? And that is usually, in most of the trends, is actually the cooperation between the corporate sector, which are either the standard private standard setting bodies, or the corporate sector, partnered with the government. So like in France, you have the national institution which does the training, but it's partnered with the corporate sector, which then helps shaping the curriculum so that they can actually deliver. In the US, it's different. The US simply hires the corporate sector to do the training, just setting what they need. So that's one of the ways to do. It's a public-private partnership. The other important example of PPP is like in the UK, there is the Cyber Essentials. This is again a cooperation between the corporate sector and the government, which actually provides guidelines to the private sector, especially small and medium enterprises, on how they should strengthen their work. And there is a sort of standardization of the work of small and medium enterprises, especially those working with the government, but not only them. So it's about the cooperation with the corporate sector, and I think this was important to underline. And there is no obstacle for us in the region to start doing that. It's again the political awareness that this needs to be done, raising the cyber security culture in a way.
Thank you very much. I think we had a great round of, had many different interesting opinions and facts and pieces of examples and expertise, and what became very clear is that, as all of you have mentioned repeatedly, that in order, for cooperation in the Western Balkans or in general to be effective, one thing that is key is first of all the awareness, the willingness, political awareness and willingness, which has to come about, which often comes about maybe from the outside, which should come from the inside, because it needs to come in a structured way. It needs to come from an awareness about what the cybersecurity needs really are, and for the government to be, willing and to embrace that and to have a consistent cybersecurity policy for that, starting with the strategy and so forth. And the need to really know what the capacities are in the country, which capacities still need to be built, and to see, but to also see which expertise is there and how within the country or between countries more advantage can be taken of expertise, especially from the private sector, but also from other stakeholders. And to really look at all these different examples that we heard and that our experts shared with us today, all these different examples of initiatives that exist, initiatives that were taken by governments, by NGOs, by private sector, to come together and starting from cooperating on information exchange, which is very important, or cooperating on capacity building, to really bring together everything that we have in order to make sure that the capacities and the framework that is needed in the different countries is there. But what I really heard is this positive view that all of you had, that cooperation within the countries, between different stakeholders and between countries is really key for that. And Vlada, you already said, and Nebasha as well, that, and others should too, that these initiatives come from different stakeholders, and of course there needs to be a government awareness, but it's also really positive that all kinds of actors see this as such an important thing and propose initiatives, propose workshops, meetings, discussions, and I think for us as well, I think it's a very positive, even if a very small contribution that we have discussed this here today, and hopefully we can continue discussing this issue, because I think there's still a lot that we need to discuss on this topic. So I'll thank you all a lot. It was a very interesting round, a very interesting evening. Thanks also to the audience for your questions and for your attention, and I wish you all a very nice evening.